Morning, everybody. Welcome to the TAC meeting.
Morning, Sam.
We are going to get started here in just a second. It looks like we have the majority of the TAC members online, and all our guests are allowed to talk also. As you know, we're getting close to the end on where we are with the administrative rules, and I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint and we'll start walking through that. We've added a couple meetings. There's going to be one very short one tomorrow on plan review, and then we added one on the 4th of April that we're going to talk about Rule 7, which is the enforcement section of the rules. Other than that, I hope to be completely finished by 3/28. We have to go to press on 3/31, but my understanding is even if we can still make some minor tweaks within a few days after that 3/31 date. So that's why we're going to do enforcement on 4/4. But after that, we're done. There's no changes to the rules that are going to be published. But what is approved by the State Housing Board out there. So I'm happy to talk about that process with the State Housing Board and how that's going to look. I am going to spend some time with them in their April meeting, kind of talking about this process and where we are and what we've done. And then they have a meeting in May where they're actually going to have a hearing on the administrative rules, a public meeting on the administrative rules. So that's how that's going to work. And with that, we'll get started on the PowerPoint. Give me just a second. Can everybody see that?
Yeah, we can.
Yep.
Great. Pretty much the same agenda as before. We're going to do real quick introductions. Actually, we're not going to do introductions. I think everybody has been to this before. I don't see any new people. Of course, I lost my attendee list, so if I see anybody else pop in, raise your hand or send me a smoke signal, and I'll try to make sure I get you permission to talk. And I believe everybody that's on the screen now has permission to talk. We'll talk a little bit about where we are with, again, the guidelines, the overview and scope. And I'm going to go through this again, everybody, just because we do record this meeting and there are people that are popping in to try to look at those recordings after the fact. And I just want to make sure we set the baselines every single time. We'll talk about the drafted changes to the administrative rules between the last meeting and this meeting, and then we'll revisit that schedule, and then we'll wrap up. As you know, the TAC's made up of 15 people, most of which are here today. We're still looking for a architect or design professional. Preference for somebody in the factory built structures, tiny home industry. I have had a couple of, I've had several email inquiries about it. Some could not commit the time to it. And there are a couple that are still checking on it. So I hope to have that position filled as soon as I get as soon as we get a qualified applicant. Like I said, we're not going to do introductions. We all know who we are. Guidelines, overview, and scope. we've got a big job to get done and a tough schedule ahead. Like I said, we're winding down on that schedule. Priority time is given to the TAC members for discussion and questions. Guests are welcome to comment by raising their hand in the meeting, and then we'll call on them. I'll try to do my best to call on people in order. I actually think that's been working out pretty well. For new members of the public, the following will get you up to speed, and that's the controlling statute. Colorado Revised Statute 2432, 3301 through 3329. The tiny home bill is passed, which is HB 221242. The administrative rules that we're working off currently and the ones that we're amending is CCR 1302-14, and then all the previous TAC meeting recordings has a wealth of information on what we've done so far to date. We're only addressing tiny homes as defined by statute, not the RV models, park models, tiny homes without wheels. And I will also expand here that we are now at the point where we're taking any administrative rule changes to any type of factory built structures, residential or non-residential. And I'll go over some of those in the updated session on what we've done between last meeting and this meeting. We're only addressing Colorado law and Colorado rules. We're only addressing foundations for those local jurisdictions that do not have a building department. And then, of course, we will follow the guidance language provided in the bill regarding small production concerns, small factories, costs, et cetera, the affordability statement that was in there. But we are going to have to charge something for plan reviews, inspection fees, and registration expenses as necessary because the legislature did not appropriate those expenses for us. And then regarding different codes and standards, we realize there's a effort for a new set of tiny home codes coming out under ANSI, and we will review those when they're ready. And there's a possibility of adopting those in the future. To keep us moving, please provide comments, and this is more for my TAC members than anybody else, in the form which can be easily adopted in the administrative rules. But like I said, we're getting down to the finish line on this, so hopefully we're in pretty good shape. So I did, as Nate mentioned earlier, I have started renumbering everything, and so you'll see in the Word document that I sent out that there's also some notes that say and highlights where I highlighted real numbers and statute references. That's just my working document to go back through and make sure those are the right references, that when HB 221242 was adopted and updated into statute, I want to make sure all those references are tied back to the right statute reference, and all the rules are referencing the right rule numbers. And that is still on me to do before. I hope to have all that done by next week. And then if you're opposed to a change, please provide that information to me, and specifically with why it's going to be an issue for you. And so we can bring it to TAC or try to work through it. At this point, I'm good with emails or phone calls, whatever works best for you. I want to get this document as close as we can to the finish line by the 31st of March. And then with that said, as you would expect, we're going to do the best we can to get the rules to where they need to be. But as we work these rules for the first year, my guess is we're going to need some tweaks. And we have the ability to either do that with emergency rules, or we can come up with a policy or procedure maybe that will let us redefine some of those processes, and hopefully get, and worst case, we'll have to make a rule change in the next fiscal year. If you're so if you're in general agreement in the change but don't like the wording, let me know, and you can feel free to make edits to my Word document and send those back to me. However you want to get that information to me, it'll be great. As you know, the rules are broken up into 7 sections. definitions, codes, and standards. 3 is fees, factory built residential structures and non-residential structures. Rule 5 is sellers of manufactured homes. Rule 6 is installation of manufactured homes. And Rule 7 is the enforcement piece. So here's some changes that we've had since the last meeting. We had a little further review at the Division of Housing, and several things were brought up. One is that statute really talks about manufacturer responsibilities, where in the past we've used factory a lot. Factory's been replaced in this set of document with manufacturing facility. Factory registration becomes manufacturer registration. Certified factory status becomes certified manufacturer status. On-site factory compliance, which we worked so hard on getting the final definition, now becomes, unless you guys are greatly opposed to it, on-site manufacturer compliance. The reason for that is we want to be more in alignment with statute on how we address these things. And so that should be fairly simple changes. And I do have some other staff on here. We are going to have to take a look at Salesforce, our IT program that provides everything, and we may have to tweak some of that. In addition, all the other documents that depend on this are going to have to be updated a little bit also. Big challenge, but we want to get the rules to a place that allow these changes to be made, and then we'll follow up as soon as possible after adoption, and we'll even start working on it before that to make sure we have everything right.
So,
any questions on that big piece? And Nate?
I'm just thinking about, I know we debated this forever when we came up with on OFC. And I don't really, well, I guess I might want to open that up again. Why don't we just call it OC?
Just OC?
On-site compliance.
Yeah, we might be able to go with OC.
I feel like it's because, you know, like for me, we've already, you know, kind of defined, you know, there's kind of a division of responsibility, right? For
Right.
the on-site completion items. And
Yeah, we're going to talk
sticking,
about that a little bit, Nate. So
yeah, okay. You know, my thought is if we're okay with defining responsibilities, we might not want to stick one of the parties that's going to be listed as responsible in the middle of that term.
although I think, and I need to double check this, Donnie had mentioned that there might be a requirement by HUD that is the manufacturer responsibility for AC or OSC or OMC or OC. So we still need to close the loop on that. All right, I'll carry that forward, Nate. Let me get to my notes page.
Well, it's not like we can rename the HUD program.
Say that again.
It's not like we're allowed to rename the term for the HUD program.
I know,
this,
right? We
this
can't
is
really,
just for modular.
yeah. Tracy, you've got your hand up? Tracy, can you hear me?
Sorry about that, Sam.
Oh, now you're echoing. You've got multiple speakers
Okay.
going.
I should be good. So, changing the terminology from factory to manufacturer, how does that terminology change impact the tiny house small business builder.
It shouldn't, Tracy, because changing it from manufacturer to factory, we're still, it shouldn't change that responsibility. For the bigger factories, it's going to be, the certification is only going to be for a particular manufacturing facility or location. And that this would still have applied with whatever we called it, factory or manufacturer compliance, Tracy. It basically is anything, and if you go look at that definition of what is in this set of rules, I think as on-site manufacturer compliance, OMC.
Yeah.
It is anything that is to be completed on site to match up with the construction drawings that were delivered for the unit. So
Got
you, as a tiny home, and I would love to have this, I hope you guys have thought about it. I don't think you guys are going to have any on-site compliance.
I don't think we are either. Because I've thought about, a couple of install processes, and, we had professional installers that, did the install, whether it was tying into plumbing correctly, or electrical, like when we did Shelley's community downtown in Springs. You know what I mean? We, stub ups were already done. We've had inspections, blah, blah, blah. So it followed its own process, right? From, they took the house, and then from there it was installation.
Right.
And, it actually went really smooth. Everybody knew their role, and my GC was happy, and Colorado Springs Utilities was happy, and everybody was happy.
Good. Now, when you say you have professional installers, that is one of the requirements. If you're going straight from factory to an installation, you'll have to use a
Professional
Division
installer.
Housing registered installer, certified installer.
Mhm. Yep.
Okay, cool.
Matter of fact, I think there's a few builders out there that will probably be applying for the installation applications as well.
It's not hard.
Yeah, and we saw that. Plus, we've already done well more than what's required. I think the requirement's 5. So I feel like, yeah, it's a no-brainer for some.
Cool. All right, I see a couple other hands up on attendees. Tani?
I just wanted to share what I put in the chat
Oh, yeah.
about the label or whatever. What about OCSC for on-site codes standards compliance? That way it points back to your department.
Right. That one's not bad either. All right, and Robin, you had a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the, for tiny houses, there may be a situation where it's required to do an on-site. I've seen some tiny houses that, because of the 13.6 height restriction, that it's like a floor that raises up, or there may be a situation where they have a roof that folds down and then folds back up after transport. So I wouldn't rule out totally tiny houses having something out there that might be need to be inspected on site.
Okay. I'm sure as soon as we say it's not going to happen, it will, Robin. So we're already talking about tiny home townhouses. So we'll work through these things. And so, yeah, there may be things, but that's going to be, but the thing that we also have to consider, and I know where my thought was going, Robin, on this was that there may be instances where a tiny home manufacturer produces a unit, the owner picks it up, and it doesn't go straight to install. And so if that's the case, then it will be the homeowner's responsibility to do those things and do the installation per state statute. And Byron, this goes to your question in the comment too, is that, yes, the individual owners can also do the installation. And that ties back to the other discussion we have, and is that not only, and so if there's AC items that the owner wants to be responsible for, we're going to tie that back to the, let's call it the OC or AC page right now. When it leaves the factory, that list of AC items or OC items or OSDC items need to be identified, and who the responsible party is for that, which is a little bit different from installation. But if there's OC items, one of the other things that changes that we made in this document and in Rule 4, there were a lot of changes in Rule 4, and I hope you guys had it. I apologize for not getting it out Thursday, but I did get it out Sunday evening to everybody. Is that there may be responsible parties, and Nate, correct me if I say this wrong, there's several possibilities of who that might be. The on-site compliance could be the responsibility of the manufacturer. It could be the responsibility of the seller, if that's what the contract states, and it could be the responsibility of the buyer, if they agree to do all those things per the contract for sale of the home.
Installer as well.
And the installer, if he's contracted to do the AC work, right? The other one that we added, and we added this over the weekend, was the developer. And this is more for multifamily. There may be a developer that is responsible for that those AC items also. And I'm going to revert to calling it AC until the new rules are published, but I'll try to catch myself on factory versus manufacturer as much as possible. But that's the way that we're actually looking at it. But we need that. We're going to have a sheet signed when it leaves the manufacturing facility on who the responsible party is for AC or OSC. Does that make sense? Any question? I see a hand up again. Let me go over there. Tracy?
I was gonna say it makes complete sense, actually, and I'm glad that you guys put the developer in there, because that has actually happened, right? That's actually what happened with with Shelley's project, is her developer took ownership of making sure all of the connections and everything. So, but that was identified early on. So I also agree with you that we're gonna have to have that documentation as a whoever, right? Builder, seller, manufacturer, whatever, you know, they're going to have that document assigned with that responsibility. Is that going to be a document that we're all consistently using, or is that something that each builder is going to be responsible for getting into their contracts or in their documentation? I assume
On your end, yes, I would recommend that it go into the contract or the agreement.
absolutely right.
And on my end, there's going to be one form that I'm going to look at that and it doesn't have to be assigned when the construction starts, but before that unit leaves the manufacturing facility.
Yep.
I want to know who's responsible for AC or OC.
Completely fair. I'd love to see that. Make sure we have that doc.
I'm looking at the chat.
Sam, I got one thing.
Who's Colorado Tiny Homes? I know the.
That's me. My name is Art.
Hey, Art, how are you?
Good.
So factory does not exclude small builders. I think there's still a definition in there for factory built. So if it's anything that's off-site, it's going to be considered a factory.
I just wanted to make sure that hadn't changed in any way since the first.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Now, if it's being built on site and we've had this situation occur, and if it's being built on site, then it is the responsibility of the local jurisdiction.
Okay. Yeah, and just a heads up, I'm, a lot of the questions that I will have or have had in the past are because I organize this festival and get builders from all over the country coming in. I get a lot of questions from people outside of the state asking about this new bill.
Great. If they're manufacturers, send them to me and I'm happy to have a chat with them. And if you guys, I would like for for this group to work on a FAQ for tiny home factories outside of the state of Colorado. I think
Yeah, that would be very helpful.
I'd be happy to help with that.
That would be awesome.
Dr. Meyer.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on that AC form and how it operates for tiny homes. There's some generic wording on that form, but it's a per job form that you get once your plans are approved, if you need it. So when you're building your contracts, it kind of just needs to state if this should occur, you know, X party is responsible, but it's nothing that you can have on the front side because you may or may not have it.
That makes sense to me, John. Nate, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, to answer something about Byron, there's an allowance in the installer rules already that allow for a homeowner to do their own install.
Yes. All right, any other discussion around that? Everybody okay with it? Dr. Meyer, I still see your hand up. Is that okay? You got some? Okay. Mike Schmidt, I'm going to allow you to talk.
Thank you,
Okay.
Sam. Sorry, I was wrapping up a client meeting this morning and I had a late join.
Not a problem. Like I said, I multitask on these meetings. I'm taking notes and running the slide deck and watching participants and the chat and trying to lead the discussion. So
You've become a master MC.
if I pause for a minute, that's the reason. And no, I'm not a master of it yet, but in another 10, 15 years, I'll get it down pat, right? So let's jump to number 2. Wildfire risk is added in more place. And again, this is a statutory change requirement that if the local jurisdiction has wildfire mitigation as part of their process, just like snow load, wind load, then the manufacturer is going to be responsible for meeting that. In areas outside of the state where there's not a building department, it does not talk about the state being responsible for that. Although I do think in the future, we will see a state WUI code. If there is a state WUI code, wildland urban interface adoption, then the state will add that to the list of required documents for areas of the state where there are not a local building department. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, I see a couple of hands come up. Tim.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you, Sam. Appreciate you putting kind of more clarification in on the wildland, the WUI code. I have not heard yet if any legislation has been put in place, or not put in place, but offered yet this year. But if that legislation does get in and get passed, similar to what we were seeing potentially from last year, that will be applying even in cities and counties that are not in the wildland urban area, like in the Front Range, or so we could have an adopted building code like in Broomfield. And if they set that up, the board, if that's how that all works out, then they would have the opportunity, or the, I guess, how would I put it? They would have the ability to come into Broomfield and say, this particular portion of your county, city and county is a WUI area, not the entire community, but just maybe around the perimeter where there's open space. So jury's out. We'll see what happens, if anything does happen in this legislative cycle. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. As an ex-county manager, I would almost look at the entire state as being subject to fires. And there's not a lot of areas that would want to see a grass fire run in 60. That was our always biggest concern of the county would be a grass fire that with a 60-mile-an-hour wind behind it, because you can't get in front of it. We had a situation, and I'll digress for just a section. We had a situation where there were a lot of other fires in the state, and we could not get any aircraft in to fight that fire. And we had one that was headed toward a subdivision. And we were finally able to, the winds died down, and we got a set of dozers through there, 4 wide, that cut a fire break. But if that wind hadn't have died, we couldn't have stopped it. And that's in rural Elbert County. That's out by Kiowa. So I think it's coming. I think that the other piece of this that I wanted to mention was that the part of the WUI that will be applicable by the state will be only on the construction side, the building side of that. There's a lot in that wildland urban interface about defensible space. That's not going to be the state enforcing that or the Division of Building Codes and Standards enforcing that. We're only going to look at what affects the construction and construction drawings. Does that make sense to everybody? All right, Nate, I see, actually I had Mark's hand up first.
I'll give my time to Nate because I think Nate's gonna ask the same question I am.
No, you go ahead, Mark. You might have a different one.
Okay, what I'm looking at is DFPC going to be involved in this, Sam? Because it is fire prevention? Yeah, there's that grin.
I don't know enough about the local building code requirements, and I don't know that we have any of Tim, James, some of you guys might have a better answer on what your adopted codes are. Did you adopt the entire WUI Wildland Urban Interface Code, or did you segment it into defensible space or construction only? And does it tie back to fire protection? And I'm sorry, Mark, when I think of fire protection, I think of sprinklers. But I know it has to deal also with fire barriers and fire resistant materials in construction also.
Yeah, because in California where it's in full force, basically they are registered through the fire marshal's office. And whoever works on that has to be certified to work on that. There is a placard that goes in either the water heater compartment or somewhere on there where they have to sign off if any work is done on it.
Yeah, and Donnie and I had a great discussion yesterday on, do we need a wildland fire insignia that we can also put in there? But I guess we need to call the state fire department there and DFPC and see what they're.
Well, I'm not sure if an additional insignia would be required, Sam, but that data plate has to be in there for the sign-offs. So that's almost like an insignia for that. It does indicate that it is WUI compliant and what materials are used for the WUI compliance.
So Mark, you think we ought to add that line to our current wind, snow, seismic zone? We talked about that too, insignia.
Actually, a WUI yes or no is probably what we need to put on there.
Okay. Or we could just put the date or NA if it's not applicable, right?
Exactly.
Nate, was that?
Yeah. So I kind of want to give folks a little bit of background. So up until this last tiny home rule came through, we did not have compliance with local wildfire requirements written into our statute.
Correct.
If you were going to Boulder County, they have some pretty aggressive ones. And, up until a year ago, we did not have to comply with them. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I'm not saying that we should not have to comply. But one of the things I think that's going to be in our future from an industry is finding a way to deal with very different requirements throughout the state, to be able to still gain the efficiencies of manufacturing. If a manufacturer has to install 3 different types of siding in 4 different types of fascia and soffit to meet the varying local wildfire codes throughout the state, you're taking away the benefits of the manufacturing environment. And so part of our future in this is going to be asking and promoting some standardization that doesn't create hundreds of different varying requirements that cannot be easily integrated into a manufacturing environment. And so this got put into the tiny home bill at the very last second, to the point where I'm almost annoyed about it because it wasn't discussed as far as how it affects a manufacturing business, which is where they stuck it into. And so I'm not saying that wildfire is not important. It is. We need to figure it out and how to comply, but we have to figure it out in a way that will allow manufacturers to produce an efficient product.
Nate, I heard everything you said, and I don't disagree. If there was, from the manufacturer's perspective, I understand if there was a state WUI code where that covered manufactured housing, then that would be easier for you to do, right?
Yeah.
But that's going to have to come from statute, or
Agreed. Yeah, we can't do anything about it now. Yeah.
Or TAC, the concern, we could go ahead and implement it now as a required code. But I would have to get a reading on statute that would say, let me back up. We could go ahead and adopt and add to Rule 2, the 2018 WUI code, and give everybody 180 days to comply with that, or we wait for statute to come out that says you have to do it. I don't know which is
well, my concern, I think our statute says that we have to comply with local,
yes,
and we can't undo that.
we cannot undo that.
So yeah, we're stuck, but it's going to have to be redone. That's why I'm annoyed that it got thrown in at the last second, because it was not fully baked for us.
Okay, Tim?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a little surprised at Nate's comment, but I don't work in a WUI jurisdiction. But if I was in a WUI jurisdiction and one of these structures were moved in and didn't meet the WUI code, I think I would have authority to not allow that, which would be no different than a structure coming in that didn't meet the local adopted wind and snow load that, say, Broomfield has. But in any case, I digress. I mean, I can't answer for Boulder County or any of the other WUI jurisdictions. But my suggestion may be, I understand Nate's concern from manufacturing side that the Division of Housing would just adopt, whether it's the 2018 or the 2021, probably the 18 WUI code, and just enforce that, because that's going to be the most restrictive,
Right.
Above and beyond maybe what some locals. But if the state ends up with this WUI code board, is what they call about, my understanding, and I'm talking like I know exactly what this legislation is going to look like, but we looked at it, the draft last year, that it would be enforcing the WUI codes for the construction, and then I didn't remember what they were doing on the site that ends up being local jurisdiction anyway, which would be beyond the purvey of the Division of Housing. So that'd be my suggestion. And then from a manufacturer, then you just would build it that way and it would be acceptable,
Right.
unless for some weird reason a jurisdiction goes above and beyond that. But I don't think that my opinion, that would happen. So that's my suggestion.
Okay, Mike, the discussions I've had is it's fairly late in the game to add a whole new ICC code to the industry this late in the TAC process. But you guys are the recommending body on this. So Mark, you got another question?
Just a simple one. Was it omitted in the code adoption from when Colorado, when CDOH adopted their code cycle?
You mean when we adopted 2015?
Well,
Let's see.
on 2015 IECC and 2018 on the rest of the codes, and that my guess is that next year we'll bump up to 2021 on everything. And maybe, and to me, that would be the time to add a new code too, if we wanted to do WUI.
Well,
Again, everything exempted as we normally do, but there's
Right.
no statewide WUI requirement yet. So
right. I mean, just like I know we haven't adopted the fire code underneath the CDOH, but if it's bracketed F inside the code, it allows me to go into that to get my reference for what they're looking at. Like for fire resistant ratings, it'll send me sometimes to the fire code, or for equipment shelters, the batteries and stuff, it'll send me to the fire code. Do other references, if we did not omit that section of the code, was it basically already part of our code cycle?
I'm not sure, Mark, I know enough to understand your question. Say that again.
Okay, so if we didn't omit it from our adopted codes, through the building codes, through certain other codes, that will reference other codes in brackets, like a bracket
Okay.
F, bracket P.
We did not specifically exclude WUI requirements.
Okay. So we may have adopted it inherently through that. Through the code, through certain other codes.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
Maybe Tim's got some input into it.
Yeah, Tim?
Yeah, I can try to help on that. So the other international ICC codes, I should say, to my knowledge, I don't see any cross-reference, that's what you might have been asking about, Mark. Any
Yeah.
cross-reference to the WUI code. So that's a standalone code that would be adopted and enforced on its own. And I just actually bought my first copy of the WUI code because I had not, we haven't adopted it and I just never paid attention to it. But with the new state potential coming up, I needed to get up to speed because we're going to be talking about it with my city council over the next 6 months to whether the state does anything or not. I'm pretty certain I'm hearing direction from my council that we may be doing it just for our local jurisdiction. But with that being said, so it's not adopted inherently, which is what I think I heard. So it would have to be a standalone. And back to the energy code, with the 15 and possibly 21. So, we talked, I brought this up before with the state energy code that's being developed and will be available by with the enforcement by July 1st. And they've got a section in that state legislation that talks specifically about the Division of Housing needing to review and adopt both the energy code, but along with that, the 2021 energy code. So the state energy code along with the ICC energy code. So I'm sure that'll be something that Sam, the TAC, I would assume, would be part, called back to maybe review that here in the summer or fall, but I don't know how you're going to process that because we're going to be ready to go with the energy code by May, or I should say June, for public consumption, public enforcement by July 1st.
Yeah, because I hate to reference back to California because they're their own third world country out there, but they amended, I should say, through their Title 24 and 25 sections of the WUI. That's how it kind of got thrown into their code cycle. And Washington basically did the same thing, is basically they adopted it through their Washington statutes. But just wondering if we're kind of pinning ourselves into a corner.
So, Donnie, I see your hand up, but give me just a second. So we just bought a copy of the WUI code too. So to be honest with you, we've not gone through that in detail yet, and we are starting to take a look at it. My recommendation going forward right now is to, we're going to see more and more states, local jurisdictions adopt wildfire interface requirements. And that we wait on the state to push a statewide WUI that we can get behind. The other piece of that, and Tim, I want to go to your comment on the energy code. There is a chapter in statute that says that we have to go to the 2021 or equivalent code. I believe it's by January of 24 or January of 25. I'll try to find, I'm unable to find that reference right now. It's in my other stack of papers, but we are expected to go to that new energy code. Now, Tim, if they change our statute and the statute that requires everybody to go, all the other state departments to go up, then of course we'll do it whenever, whatever statute says, but we are already scheduled to go up on that. Donnie?
Yeah, just a couple things with the wildfire mitigation. Once we get that adopted and start not necessarily enforcing it from the state level, but at the local level, if it's required by the locals, do we still want to place an insignia on that structure that it meets that rating, or do we just kind of treat it kind of like we do with the sprinkler systems, that if it's been approved on the plans and inspected that way, and our primary insignias are placed on there, it just signifies that it meets everything that's on the approved plan.
So Donnie, what we talked about was either adding a line to the insignia, and this was before you popped on, was adding a line that on the current insignia that says where we have snow, wind, seismic area, also wildfire, and then either put the applicable code that is a year, or put NA if it's not designed to that. So Tracy, you had a question in the chat about how does this affect tiny homes? If you are building to a local jurisdiction specific fire code, I'm sorry, wildland urban interface code, then you may have to change some of the materials on in your construction with the fire rating. And that will come when you look and investigate, you know, if you're going to build a home for Aspen, when you get all the local requirements for wind, snow, and fire, there will be a list of those things. All right, there's a couple other things in the chat. Oh, I see another hand up. Robin?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. I wanted to see if we needed to put something in the administrative rules regarding the tiny houses on wheels that may at some point be moved to another state, let's say a warmer climate in the wintertime, and then move back after the cold weather is gone. That tiny house would not have to meet the new quote unquote standards, whether it be changes in building codes, changes in fire codes, or that kind of thing, sprinkler systems and insulation requirements, that once you build a house, obviously you don't have to redo everything to the newer building codes, but this house moves out and then moves back in, and maybe the local jurisdiction might say, oh, well, we've passed some new legislation and now you're not allowed back in here.
So my understanding, Robin, on that is that once is built and has an insignia on it, it's built to those codes. They're not going to go if there's a new code adopted by a local jurisdiction and knock on every door and say, you have to update your construction. My argument would be for the tiny home industries to make that same comparison with the local jurisdictions, and for the local guys on the phone or on the call, correct me if I'm wrong, but you are in there on a certain date, you've built it to those codes. Now, what will happen is if you have what might happen is if you have a tiny home that goes straight to the local jurisdiction, goes straight home with the owner, or goes to a warmer climate, and then doesn't come into the state, and then they want to put it in a local jurisdiction. Let's say your home was manufactured in 2023, and the local jurisdiction put in a wildland fire interface code in 2021. You may have to have a discussion with the local jurisdiction on whether or not they're going to allow that. And I don't know how to get around that, except that you might be able to take other wildland fire concerns, such as defensible space, and offset with the construction materials. But I would love to hear from the local folks on that. And I'll go to Tim next, and then Donnie, back to you.
Yeah, thank you. At least in Broomfield, I can only speak to my jurisdiction. We base the codes that we enforce based on a permit issuance date, and not say a permit application date. Now, I don't know if other jurisdictions will follow along with that. I think some kind of use the term like grandfathered in based on the permit application date. But in this case, like your question or example would be not really permit application date, but manufacturing date. So if a structure was coming into Broomfield, it would need to meet my current adopted code. And I just adopted the 2021 code package last Tuesday night, or council did, I should say, with an effective date for any permit issuance issued as of April 15th. So in a month. And so it's not based on, all the permits I have in the system. Otherwise, we'd have a run on permits to try to beat a particular code update if there are significant changes, which there typically are. So I can just speak for Broomfield, but I think there are quite a few of my colleagues that do the same process.
Sure.
But I also think there's some that are going by a permit.
That's going to make it harder. But Tim, thank you for clarifying that. I was a little off on that. The other code book that we're starting to take a look at is the existing building code. I don't know how it's referenced, EBC or whatever, for existing buildings that are going to maybe come in from other places that are already closed up, how we would put those in areas of the state that don't have a local building department. And I don't know if any of the local jurisdictions have adopted that and have looked at that in detail, but it's something else we probably need to do. Donnie, I promise to go to you, and then Sean, I'll go to you after that.
Yeah, Sam, just real quick, kind of answer the question for once it's approved, it's good to go for the rest of its life, basically. It's covered already in our state statute 3311. I believe it's like the last paragraph that's in there that says once the plan has been approved, it's final. So there is nothing that the locals can do to change that unless they're moving that structure to a location that the design criteria does not meet their requirements that you're kind of touching on. So let's say you built a structure that wasn't wildfire mitigated, and that jurisdiction that they're moving it to requires that they may have to update that structure for that.
Okay, thank you, Donnie.
Yeah, it would be just like a snow load that it didn't comply with that, and they moved it to another jurisdiction that had a higher snow load.
Which ties back to that discussion tangentially about building what snow load and wind loads to build a tiny home that the buyer doesn't know where it's gonna go yet, right? If, depending on what you build, it may limit where they take it. And that probably needs to be made clear in the discussions between buyer and seller. Sean, I promise to go to you next.
Yeah, I can't speak to the WUI code part of it, but I do know that we display homes for in excess of 2 years sometimes that are IRC code, and we've never run into a compliance problem with the local jurisdiction. Many times even out of state like Utah, as long as when the home was built, we're to the most current code set. If we as retailers if we have to build it to the current model or the adopted code, ICC code, then we would effectively literally stop displaying modular at all and just strictly do HUD code, because we've got a huge investment. I've got over $1 million worth of IRC code shown here on my dealership. And if the code changes and I have to rush to try and sell it, that would definitely affect our business substantially.
All right, I want to jump back to Tim, and then I've got an attendee hand up, and then I want to follow up on a chat question.
Yeah, good deal. Thank you. Yeah, and thank you for just that comment, Sean. From a clarification, I might have misspoke a little bit, or it didn't quite come out correctly. So when a structure that's got the tag on it that says whatever code it was built under, maybe it was an older model that's been sitting on the lot for a couple of years or whatever that is, or getting relocated. And let's say I'm under the 21 codes and it's showing 2015. By my understanding, by law, I have to accept that as long as it meets the design loads. So that's pretty much. Now overlaying that with the WUI code, that's kind of interesting because I haven't had to deal with that. So I don't know from a statutory requirement that if we've adopted a WUI code, then, and maybe that goes back to Nate's comment in Boulder, with a Boulder County example, that they wouldn't have to meet that. But in any case, so whatever the code got the tag on and approved by the state, I have to accept that, even including like an older electrical code or whatever. So I'm sorry if I misspoke, and maybe hopefully
No,
that
and you
clears up.
actually clarified it a little better for me, Tim, than I did. And Donnie's response was very good also. Tawny?
Thanks. So a couple of things. With the HUD code, it's preemptive, as is the state adopted building codes. So those are preemptive, but the areas where we run into challenges specifically with the HUD code is the wind and snow requirements, depending on what jurisdiction the structure is going into. And the trigger, I'm guessing, for the tiny homes and other structures would be that installation permit. And that, that might require the structure, maybe not the structure specifically, but when that home is installed, that there be some sort of mitigation for wind and snow if that tiny home isn't constructed to the higher load requirements.
Right, and I'm not sure what that mitigation would look like. And Tawny, I like the way you said that. And I think at the end of the day, though, it's still the local jurisdiction that's going to have to give that building permit, right?
Well, it'd probably be the state for installation. The state would issue the installation permit,
Right.
or the installation authorization, I think is the correct term. The locals currently can require like a snow roof or a wind fence if a HUD code goes into a jurisdiction where the jurisdiction requires a load higher than what the home was constructed to, just because the construction of the home, of the structure, is preemptive. So there has to be a different mechanism to mitigate that load.
Right. Okay, good. Thank you. All right, there was a question about in the chat from Brad regarding permits for every time a tiny house is reintroduced to a site. I don't know, Brad, we've we've talked about that. I think once if a home gets a permit to occupy a piece of land on a temporary or permanent foundation, I don't know if if the home moves and then comes back, if it's going to require a new permit, but I'll let my local guys talk about that. Tim, you've been very patient with these questions. What's your thought? Oh, Brad, actually, I'm going to let you clarify your question if it's still a question. Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, the reason I've asked the question was if there's a new building permit required, does that reintroduce all of these concerns that Robin raised? Every time there's it's a new building permit. If there's a new, if you reintroduce it to the site, does that mean that you now have to meet the current building requirements? And I think that was the essence of what Robin was trying to ask.
I'm sorry, I was offline. I was talking to one of my inspectors, so I missed the bulk of that question.
So Tim, the gist of it is a home comes into a local jurisdiction and gets a permit and gets a CO. And then it leaves for a year and comes back. Will it require a new permit from the local jurisdiction?
We would, yes. So is that to take where it goes away and then comes back right on this to the same site on the same foundation?
Same site, same foundation, 6 months, gone to Arizona, comes back and reinstalls.
I would say yes, and primarily to, well, first of all, if it's the same unit, we would just double check the snow and wind load, but we would at least need the permit for the electrical and the utility hookups, just like a mobile home.
Would you also require updates based on code changes between one permit and the other?
If there were just for the ancillary items on the outside that are beyond the scope, I forget what our final term was at starting the whole thing that Nate came out with. The stuff that comes with it that is part of the unit and beyond the scope of the local AHJ. So if it was like a set of stairs, service, something, where we'd have to meet the current electrical code or something along those lines.
Okay, and then when you do a reinstall, then would it get a new CO after the reinstall? Looking at Tracy's questions in the chat.
Well, I know it's not a mobile home. We don't do COs on the mobie home permits.
Okay, then you don't have to do a CO, right?
But we've never done, I mean, we got a couple of mobile home parks. I think we've had a couple of these types of structures come in on permanent foundations, maybe 2 or 3 in the last 10 years, and we do a certificate of occupancy for that unit. Now, in a tiny home, this is new because it would end up potentially, like you said, hooking it up, pulling it for 6 months and then coming back. I would say we'd probably do a new CO once it's hooked back up. I don't have that answer because we haven't had our structures get picked up and brought back.
Right. All right, so and Tawny's response to Tracy there is also very good. It's not going to require any opening up, but if you're reinstalling the plumbing and electrical, then yeah, it's going to probably have to be reinstalled. Tracy, go ahead.
Yeah, Sam. So I guess I'm just a little bit confused, and maybe
Okay.
because I see 2 different approaches from the tiny house folks. So yes, I am in my tiny house. I unplug the 50 amp cord and the septic hose, and I decide to go to Arizona for the next month, and my water hose, and I decide to go to Arizona for the next month, 2 months, 6 months. It doesn't matter, right? I come back, or maybe it does matter. Maybe there's a 30-day rule. Maybe there's a 90-day rule. I don't really know yet. But let's say I leave off to Arizona, I come back and I'm literally going to park in the exact same spot, take the exact same hose and reconnect it. I'm going to plug in the exact same 50 amp electric cord and my water hose, and I'm all set. Are we saying that I'm going to be required to have, as a homeowner, a new installation permit every time I do that?
What about your tie downs for your foundation? I think that's more of the critical component.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, okay, fair enough. But that's as simple as in some jurisdictions, like let's just say here in Colorado Springs, for example, we did the, tie down straps, which, aren't very, very hard to do. So let's say they re-tie down the straps. You're saying the homeowner, if the homeowner does it themselves, that's one thing. I guess if they have a professional installer come and redo the straps, because no homeowner is going to pay somebody to plug in a 50 amp cord. I'm going to go plug it in myself. It takes me 30 seconds. I'm not going to pay somebody. I don't need to pay anybody to come and do that for me, right? Maybe I don't know how to redo my straps, and I do have to pay my installer to come back and install my straps again. I mean, that's a very real situation. The other one is I have a tiny house that's tied into plumbing and electrical permanently. Then yeah, I would assume, somebody's got to come out and reinstall that again.
Right. I don't think it's the intent of the state to require a reinstall permit in the first situation that you responded to.
Yeah. It's more the permanent, right? Like, let's say I'm hardwired in on
Yeah.
my house, right? Let's say I have a 100 amp service. I have an ANSI build 119.5, whatever. It's not really that RV, movable. I don't know. I'm just curious, you guys, just if it feels like those are the two setups that we see. And I felt like I heard somebody say we're going to have to get a permit every time. Is that
Okay.
a no?
Good discussion, Tracy. I'm making some notes. Somebody in my attendee has a hand up, and then Donnie, I'll jump back to you. Brad? Brad, did you have something else to add?
I think
Sorry,
we just,
no.
Sam, and I'm sorry, I just looking at some of the chat. I think some of the builders are just trying to understand the difference between those folks that have just, quick hookup versus more of the, I got to have my plumber come back out and retie in my plumbing.
Right.
Because we do have both happening. And I would hate to see people to have to repay a fee when it's a simple connect, right? No homeowner should have to do that. Like, it's a simple connect. But if it's something where I need my plumber or my electrician, I respect that. Or my installer, as Nate brought up, maybe I don't know how to do my own straps, so I do got to pay my installer to come back out and strap me. Maybe twice a year I have a deal with him, whatever it is.
Right. Okay, Donnie?
Yeah, for the installation and relocation of a tiny home, that's a little tricky on the installation part of it when you're requesting an installation authorization or installation certificate from us, because HUDs, they're temporarily installed, but they still get installation insignia from us. So maybe because of I guess the intent of a tiny home when they're using it as a temporary basis, maybe we should have like a time that says like, hey, if you're going to temporarily install this for more than 6 months, go ahead and you need to get the installation certified, or because you just never know. HUD homes are temporary. If they are not temporary, but they have a temporary installation for temporary foundations, but they can be there for years and then move, right? Or they can be there for maybe a year or two and then move. But they still go through our reinstallation process of getting the installation certified through our program. And that's either by us or through somebody who's certified to do the installation certificate on our behalf. So if it's going to be like something where they pull it to a KOA and plug in at their pedestals there or something like that, I don't think it would make sense for us to have them do a installation certificate. But if it's there for a long period of time, then it may make more sense to do it that way.
Thanks, Donnie. Sean, I think you were next.
Yeah, this is great discussion because it brought up some other things that I'm thinking about. We're putting these in as IRC structures. And very likely if they get pulled off, county is not going to know about it. And then it gets put back in and they may or may not know about it. But the interesting thing is under most of the jurisdictions I operate in, if you've got a structure that is being assessed by the assessor's office, and I don't know that we can put this into any usable portion of this bill, but or rules, but the assessor typically would require a demolition permit for any permanent structure to be moved so that it comes off the tax rolls. And then you'd have to go back in and re-put it in. So I do agree with Donnie that maybe there should be a time frame in this somehow to for people that are moving them, back and forth seasonally.
Good point, Sean. Tracy?
I mean, that's impacting. I mean, I don't really know what to say to that. That's I can tell you that there's going to be a lot of tiny house people that feel like that's there's no incentive for these people to have the freedom of being a snowbird or living the way they want to live. So you guys are locking that down. I mean, what's the incentive for me to unplug my house? I've already gone through all the process to have it installed. I pulled my permits. I've done what I'm supposed to. I built the house to code. I got my certificate of occupancy. I've done everything I'm supposed to do. Put more insulation in that I need, paid the costs that I need to. I want to unconnect my house and I want to go spend the month in Arizona and I want to come back and reconnect my house. Now if there's a demolition process and a reconnection process, there's no incentive for the freedom for our industry. That's what our tiny houses look for, folks. That's it.
So Tracy, I understand what you're saying. I know everybody on the phone would agree that tiny homes are a new solution to the affordable home crisis in Colorado, and there's unique characteristics of it that everybody is struggling with. The local jurisdictions, the titling and tag folks, the assessors. I mean, everybody it's going to take some time to get up, but I don't know how to fix it all with that. I know the assessors and clerks and recorders are talking about this. I'm on a group that's also talking about it. I haven't had anybody bring up the demolition requirement yet in that group, but it's a new animal, right? And we just have to work through it. Mike, your question on reinstalls, I'm not sure what that would look like. The other, just to go back to that other group, part of the group says that if that home is not there on January 1st, the tax rate still will be vacant land. It will not be taxed as a home, but if it is there January 1st, then it will be taxed as a home. So, and if it's on a temporary or permanent foundation. So it's a struggle right now. And I see a couple panelists. Tim, I want to go to you next.
Yeah, just a suggestion. Possibly to reach out to the state plumbing board, the head plumbing inspector, and get their opinion on what they would be looking to do or want local jurisdictions to do for these disconnect and reconnect every 6 months or whatever that might be for these units. I'm not familiar with a quick disconnect for a sewer line to a drain, building drain, or I guess I've seen quick disconnects for water lines, but I think that'd be important to get that, which would also help local jurisdictions on how to, well, you know, you can just do that and not need a licensed plumber to do it, or, you know, it's different on the electrical. If it's a plug and play, then you're not going to have a permit. But if it's hardwired and you disconnect, absolutely you need another permit and an inspection to make sure the hardwired was reconnected. So those are the two, at least on the electrical side. That'd be my suggestion.
Not a bad suggestion. Brad, I see your comment too. We could do that, but let me think about that. Clarifying that moving is not considered modification and moving is not demolition. All right, Sean, you had something else?
Yeah, no, because these are titled, well, I guess that's a question, is when these are built, are they going to be titled? Under the IRC code, typically they aren't, but under HUD code, we do have operable titles. That would have to do with lending, and anytime a title transfer is done, you've got documentation that goes to the state, so they could institute taxing different than a deed. They could institute taxing differently based upon the filing of that title. So, I mean, I know it's kind of getting deeper here, but I'm just looking at the functional side of things. And I definitely see from the business perspective of what do I have to tell my buyers? How do I explain this to them that makes sense? And I think the whole concept of what do you want to call it, a temporary installation versus a permanent installation, gets into all these utility connections and things like that vary. You know, you're a permanent installation, you might have the meter panel on the tiny home and be hardwired in and pretty much never going to move it. In another sense, you may have a pedestal like Tracy was saying and just plug in and plug out. So, you know, I think those definitions come into play for future local jurisdictions to make clarifications.
Right. Good point. All right. In the essence of time, I'm not sure we're going to solve all those problems today, but I am making a list of things that we need to continue to work on. Remember, our administrative rules will only be covering the basically the closed construction piece of the home, to some extent, the installation. And then local jurisdictions are going to have some of their own requirements, and we'll just have to try to sort some of that out as we move forward. We started this discussion on wildfire risk. And then the next topic I have is that the fees are still under review. I dumped a big spreadsheet on Donnie yesterday and asked him to help me to get those numbers filled in. We're actually going to look at 3 different states and 3 local jurisdictions and try to do a comparison analysis. From my understanding, this has not been done before. Our fees have not changed, but we are going to take a look at that. It's not our intent. If you look at our 3-year history on revenue versus expenses, we're getting close to break even, and due to some technology challenges this year, we may actually end up a little bit in the hole. So I don't know what the fee structure will look like, but it is not our intent to vastly increase any fees, and we will do our best to hold them to what the current list is. One of the previous versions that I sent out on the document had a set of different cancellation fees based on the time frame that it was going to be canceled. after discussions with the IT team and the coding team and having to refund money for previous fees, we decided just to keep it a cancellation fee for same day. If the inspectors, if you cancel inspection the same day, your fee is forfeit. You'll have to reschedule and repay the fee. If you cancel the day before that, then you're probably going to be okay. We'll just carry that fee over. The other piece of this that I want to talk about with fees, and it really affects the manufacturer registration, is that I put in there a 3-year manufacturer registration. That threw up some red flags too on how we recognize the fees. We're still trying to work through that, but that might go away. So if that's a big one for the manufacturers, I really need to know about it. It might be where we do a 3-year. The only loophole I see right now in being able to do that is a 3-year manufacturer registration with annual payments. Just to keep my cash as cash, or keep my budget and revenue this equal through across years. So if that would work for you guys, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll keep. It gets complicated when you're deferring revenue to future years from the budget side. And they told me I really don't want that headache. So if you guys would be okay with annual renewals, please let me know. Any thoughts on that? On fees?
Yeah, I had my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I see that. Go ahead, Robin.
Throwing out the question, you're building your own tiny house, or you're a school, either that or you're a DIY owner builder. How does that play out? I mean, we're not gonna, it'll be a registration, not gonna be a certification, but you're not gonna, would you still pay a annual fee as long as you're working on your home, or just to throw that out for the smaller type person?
Right. Thanks, Robin. That's a good point. Let me cover the nonprofit side of it first. So originally in the fees, we had an exemption for nonprofit agencies. And after more discussions with people at the Division of Housing, that was really intended to apply to nonprofits that were using state or federal money, because it didn't seem to make sense to give money toward a housing project and then take it back in registration and fees. So I've clarified that language a little bit in the fee section. And let's just use Habitat for Humanity as an example. If they're building offsite and using state or federal money, then they would be exempt. If they are doing a program that is not on site, they would have to apply for factory status, just simply because we've got, then you're allowing the nonprofits to compete with the private factories, right? And then on the small home builder, I think that there is a exemption if it's under a certain number of units a year. Can anybody recall that being written in there? If a guy's building his own tiny home,
I think the small manufacturer was 20 units or less a year.
I don't think it was that high.
No.
I'll have to check on that, Robin. I don't remember what that was stated.
It's five units a year for maintaining your registration, but that's
Well,
not
I took
something.
that out because the question will be if they want inspections from this, and it's starting to recall, Donnie, you may want to help me on this. If a guy wants to build a tiny home in his shop and then carry it to his property and in the flat tops or up by the flat tops, is he going to need inspections? And yes, he is. And he's gonna need that insignia when it moves up there, right? So it can be installed. So I know that there was a previous requirement for 5 factories to maintain registration, but it might be a huge factory in Alabama that only ships 4 units a year to Colorado. They would still have to be and then they ship hundreds of units to other states. They would still have to have a registration. Am I getting that right, everybody?
It was just to maintain your registration, but like I said, it's not something we really enforced on. If somebody's building for Colorado, great, right? Why would we want to take away their registration just because they built, 3 units? We had one builder that only built maybe 2 or 3 that wanted to register again. That was, a small time builder. So we just allowed them to re-register.
Mark?
Well, this more affects the commercial side on where I sit at, Sam, because of the types of buildings that I work with a lot. These guys may only build 1 or 2 a year for Colorado, but it is every year. So I'm not sure. I just know that they basically never get through the entire process at one time. I've got one individual right now trying to going back through the entire registration and everything. So that's on the commercial side though.
And that's on the commercial side. We're talking, yeah, okay. Donnie, how do we I'm not sure what my question is here, Donnie. I was going to say, I know we have factories or manufacturers every now and then that pop in and they're not registered and they have a unit ready to deliver. And this is primarily, we're talking equipment, connexes that have been modified as equipment for oil fields or that type of thing. So we have those things pop in. And we don't have a threshold, Donnie, for the number of units required for registration?
No, I'm pretty sure the law says if you're going to be building for the state of Colorado, you need to be registered. So it doesn't matter if you're building 1 or 100, you need to register with our program. We actually have a homeowner who's going to be building their own modular Connex box home that is in Texas that is going to be possibly moving to like the Leadville area that we asked them to register.
Yep, I remember that. Okay, because we still have to do all the work, right? And it's going to be the same for tiny homes. We're going to have to look at the construction drawings. We're going to have to whether you use a third party for the plan review or review those plans ourselves, and then ensure that it is constructed per code and gets the stamp at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, because it's offsite construction, right? So if they're building offsite and they need to get certified through our program, if they're building a modular unit, it has to go through our certification process to be certified as a modular unit. It's a little, I guess, a bit of a headache for them to have to do that. But like I said, I believe that's what our statute says. If you're building for the state of Colorado, you have to register with our program to get certified for that unit. And then you have to go through our program for the installation process for the certification of that as well. And I'm not sure of a local jurisdiction that would accept a manufactured building that didn't go through our program.
If it was in the same local jurisdiction, I think you could probably talk to the locals and let them get your building permit, construction permit for that same location.
If it's being built on site, yeah.
Yep, that would be offsite. On-site construction, that would be an equivalent for us. But yeah, I think you're right, Donnie, statute does require that. But I want to go to Nate and then Mark.
My comment was just in case somebody from the tiny home industry is listening to that dialogue that just happened. That is only if you want to comply with this program. If you would like to build a RV code, whatever, no code type tiny home, you're on your own. However, you're probably not going to get the treatment you would like when you walk into the building department that you will if you comply with this program. So it's not that every tiny home manufacturer has to register with the state. It is that the tiny home manufacturers that want to abide by this program, which will probably be more widely accepted in the state from a local jurisdiction standpoint, those do.
Right.
So it'd be
Thank you,
a
Nate.
tiny home built to our definition of what a tiny home is.
Correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
You're right, Nate. Thank you for that clarification. Mark?
I'm just trying to, Donnie, you can correct me if I'm wrong. Registration is registration. The maintaining of the 5 units per year is for a certification. If you are a certified manufacturer, you must produce at least 5 a year to maintain your certification. Is that correct, Donnie?
I'll look that up again. I actually just looked it up the other day, but I forgot. But I know it's 5. I thought it was 5 to maintain your registration, but let me double check.
Right. Yeah, I thought the registration, like Donnie said, if you just build one, you still got to be registered in the state of Colorado. If you're going, if you're going to the program.
All right, so, Tim, let me let you back in. I appreciate you letting me know. Okay, Tim, you should be able to get back, join back. And then Robin, you asked for an idea of cost and paperwork required for a small or owner builder. I'd be happy to have that discussion at another time, but it is, Donnie, that might be something we might want to come up with for the tiny home folks. What that looks like as far as the fees are in the administrative rules now. You can go look and look at what a registered factory costs. You can look at what the inspection fees are. They're generally the plan review fee is per square foot, which is going to be very economical for tiny home folks. And then the rest of the fees are all listed in there. All right. Good. So that's where we are on fees. Like I said, in section 4, rule 4, we actually have rewritten that certified factory program quite a bit, and third-party agency paragraphs quite a bit. That was most of my weekend, was rewriting those. Please take a look at those and see if you have any questions or concern. Did anybody have any discussion points they want to talk about certified manufacturer or third-party agencies right now? And I know you only guys had 2 evenings and 1 work day to take a look at that. So
I got something, Sam.
okay.
All right. So the thing that I want to kind of point out, and when I do this, I'm looking at Sam's, red line version or blue line version of this thing, is 4.96. As a condition of keeping your certification, you have to comply with a document called Performance Criteria for Monitoring Manufacturers and Third-Party Inspection Agencies. This is a document that's been around for some time inside DOH that kind of hasn't been used a whole lot, just because we haven't had a lot of certified factories or, kind of really stood up programs, to monitor them. But this document, now that we're creating a little bit more of a clear path for certification, this document becomes how you keep that certification once you are certified. And so it's a kind of a grading, it's like a report card basically. And so Sam will send this out to everybody to take a look at because it's an important piece of this. The thing that I noticed in it, Sam, is it's going to, with what we're doing, it's going to immediately need to be updated because it has its own levels of factory performance. You know, there's like, I want to say, you know, depending upon the scorecard, you know, about how they're performing. In the very top one is called, you're only a certified factory if you meet the very top one. In what we're saying is that you're certified, we're going to use this document that has layers inside of it in that column of, you know, levels of, you know, inspection frequency and all that kind of stuff. But inside of this thing, it says only if you get to the top are you certified. And so we're going to need to clean up that language pretty quickly, considering everyone, you know, most of them are going to be considered certified, but everyone needs to make themselves familiar with this document. And the other thing that I'm a proponent of is putting something into the rule that says that, you know, updates to the performance criteria for monitoring manufacturers and third-party inspection agencies is a document that also kind of requires, you know, industry participation if updates are going to be made to it, because this is how everybody is graded to keep their certification active. And if there's changes to it, they need to be, you know, with stakeholders.
So there's a couple things to let me unpack there, Nate, and that is one of the things that I failed to do in this last version was identify at least the categories of those specific criteria that the certified manufacturers will be held responsible for that are in this document. With that said, yes, this document needs to be updated very soon. And I hope to continue to bring that to the TAC as we move forward, that everybody has a chance to look at it and weigh in on it before adoption. I thought about making it just an appendix to the document, but I think that's a little extreme. I am going to try to summarize that document and list the major areas in the next version of this. So I think you and I are right on the same page with making that a little clearer on how the certified manufacturers are going to be held responsible. What we're going to be looking at for them in order to continue that status. Is that what you were trying to say?
Exactly what I was trying to say.
Well, good. I'm glad I got it right. Any other questions, concerns on that certified factory or the third-party agencies? Mark, please take a look at that document I sent out with respect to third-party agencies and see if that isn't cleaned up a little bit toward the good.
Already working on it, Sam.
Good, good. Thank you. All right, let me jump on then down to the next one. I'm up to number 6, which is general editorial changes throughout the document. This document's been modified, the administrative rules. I'll just caveat it right now. It's been modified by several people in the past. We each have our own unique style. I've already recommended to management that we rewrite this entire thing and have a professional writer do it next year. So right now we are, if it's difficult for me as I read through a paragraph and I can almost pick out where the new stuff came in because in each year, because it's written a little differently, a little different tone, a little different verbiage. I'm trying to not make it a Alabama English document. And so if you guys have any simple editorial changes you'd like to see, let me know. We'll try to get them in. If not, I hope the TAC is supportive of a rewrite of this and maybe a new table of contents and reordering some of this stuff for next year. Any thoughts or discussions on that?
I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to that. Sounds awesome.
Yeah, well, in one way, I'm looking forward to it, and the other way, it's like, oh my God, what am I opening up? So we'll get it cleaned up. All right, thank you. Renumbering and cross-checking, I already talked about that. There are some other things that are, I know we talked a little bit about on-site manufacturer compliance a little bit, and we talked about the responsible parties being not only, I'm trying to think of the other changes that we made. Does anybody have any other changes they want to bring up and discuss in this version of the document or that we've talked about that need to be changed before next year? And to be honest with you, I've got one more. Let me just run through here. Next meeting, if you could get me any comments by the 20th of March, that would be fantastic. And then I want to have a discussion on that's more geared toward the tiny home people. And if we don't get it all done today, then I want to talk about a separate meeting for that regarding registration requirements of the National Highway Traffic Safety Act in order to permanently attach a tiny home to a vehicle chassis. Looking forward at the remaining schedule, there's a new meeting tomorrow. It's only an hour. It's focused on the manufacturer registration and certified status. And I think specifically on plan reviews. That's a 1-hour meeting tomorrow, and I will get an invite out to everybody with the Zoom link. It is publicly noticed. March 28th, again, will be our final big discussion. And that's, I'm gonna hopefully have 2 versions of the document to send out to you. The final red line, and the, I'm gonna go through and just accept all the comments on one version so you can read through it and highlight if there's any questions or concerns. And that way I have a better way to look at my numbers and all that. March 31st is my deadline to file those proposed permanent rules. Now, you would think that final deadline is final deadline, right? But it's not. Well, we actually have a few days, as I mentioned, to amend that document before it goes to publication. So that's why we're going to have another meeting of the TAC on just on Rule 7 on the enforcement piece on April 4th. I don't think it'll be all half a day meeting. I think it'll be fairly quick, and I'll get out a version of that beforehand so everybody can see it. May 9th is going to be that rulemaking hearing before the State Housing Board. Once that final version of the document is out, I've got another larger stakeholder list. We're going to try to get it out to everybody, and feel free to share that. There was also some discussion offline about whether or not who can attend these TAC meetings. They're open to the public. They're publicly noticed. Anybody can attend these, and I welcome anybody to attend these. Once we go to the wider group, I expect some revisions. I hope that when we get to the State Housing Board, we have worked out any discrepancies or conflict. I don't want to say conflict for that State Housing Board. So if you want to get on the phone with me and talk through something, that would be great. What I don't want to do is get in front of the State Housing Board and it looks like that we haven't brought up the concerns for everybody. I hope that makes sense to this group. June 30th will be the effective date. July 1st is the statutory deadline. And I think July 3rd, looking forward to the calendar, is the first business day to do that. With that said, I also in this document made some changes to multifamily installations. If anybody has expertise in that area, please take a look at that. We think we're getting very close. Oh, and I do have some other notifications. So the tiny home insignia is going to be a very nice, lovely pink. And the multifamily installation insignia will be a nice hard black with the silver fields. So those seem like the best color choices based on what's available and what we currently have. If anybody's opposed to pink, tiny home industry guys, let me know, but I think it'll be fine. It'll be very clear, very bright. It'll pop out when we're looking at that insignia. We're trying to get those insignia ordered up just as quickly as we can. But again, I'm not going to hit the go button on the order until we figure out where we're going to put wildland urban interface compliance, whether it's going to be a separate insignia or that. To me, it can work either way. If you have strong opinions on that, let me know. I need to check my inventory and see how many thousands of insignias I currently have before I make all those obsolete too. So with that, other than the discussion on vehicle chassis for tiny homes, are there any other discussion points that anybody wants to talk about? And I'm going to pause here for just a second to think about, again, if you have changes, if you go through these administrative rules and something catches your eye, please send me an email about it. If there's a major thing, then let's talk about another meeting before the 28th meeting, possibly. We'll find an hour to set up a time. It's very easy for me to public notice these side groups. Basically, what I say is 2 or more TAC members may be attending a session on plan review or vehicle chassis or for tiny homes or something like that. Unfortunately, I'm not sure the whole group can come out that, but I'll try to make sure we record those meetings, and then also I'll take significant notes that I'll put in an email for the next meeting. Sound good to everybody? Okay, let's have a discussion on vehicle chassis requirements for tiny homes. It's been brought to my attention that RVs are required to register as a additional manufacturer or finishing manufacturer for vehicle chassis with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. And there is their own set of standards to do that for interstate travel. The Department of Transportation at the federal level classifies anything that moves down a highway as a vehicle, whether it's motorized or whether it's not motorized, and also whether, and then they have different levels of requirements for if you buy a truck bed without if you buy a pickup and are adding special equipment to it afterwards, say it's for boxes and fire hoses and pumps and things like that, that you have to register with them. The RV industry has acknowledged that all their stuff is required to be registered with the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. The only exception that I can find, there's actually 2 exceptions to that I have found. One is farm equipment. Farm equipment is not required to be registered with NHTSA. I think that is because it is short haul stuff that is just moving from one field to the other. And its primary purpose is not to be designed for road. It's designed to be out in the field. I believe the other exemption for that is HUD code manufactured homes, but I'm not sure if they have a separate exemption for that in DOT regulations, or if they have a separate and equivalent code in the HUD code. Somebody that builds those could help me out with that. So the question will be, we have with related to tiny homes on that, I'm not sure I can enforce that requirement. I think the argument could also be made that tiny homes, as we've defined them, built to the IRC code, are not designed for primary use on a road. They're designed for permanent occupancy. But I want to have that discussion, and I want to have it on the record so that we have some concerns or directions. Would anybody like to jump in on this topic? I see some hands up. Good. Mark, you want to go with that first? Or do you have some other topic?
Well, it's been a while since I've been in the HUD field, but when I was one of the IPIAs in Arizona, basically we had to do a road test for the HUD chassis. Once that chassis passed that road test with the home on there, it was covered underneath the HUD label at that point. So it did not require a VIN number.
Okay, so that's before you attach anything to the chassis, right?
Correct. Well, no, actually you have to have some weight on the chassis, and HUD will tell you what that minimum is. Usually it would be the first stages of doing like a new chassis development or something like that. You would design the home for it, attach the home to it, but it would be with the escort. We would escort them. The driver would take out a permit for it, and then we would put 400 miles on that chassis.
Okay. Well, I know what we've required, our preference is, and why we were pushing this was that they buy a made for somebody
Built for purpose.
built for
Built
purpose.
for purpose.
Basically,
Thank you.
a
Yes, sir.
built for purpose trailer or chassis that already has a VIN and gross vehicle weight and all the lights and running equipment on it. And that after that, it's permanently attached, and that's the direction we were heading with in the TAC very early in these discussions.
Now, underneath the commercial side of this, Sam, like construction offices and relocatable classrooms and stuff like that, those chassis do not have to be registered, correct?
I don't know. That's a really good question. Does anybody know?
I've never seen them registered. Especially for the IPOs, the field construction offices and stuff.
Probably because oftentimes they just have those mobile units dropped off by a professional shipping company, and then it's staying on their build site. So I don't know that it necessarily needs plates, right?
Well, I mean, I do a lot of multi-labeled units. They call them stock units.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're basically for like, I don't want to throw any names out there, for like William Scotsman and stuff like those that will have a lease fleet, and they'll get them labeled for 4 states. And of course they still go through the local when they get to that state for the installation of it. But as far as the over the road part of it, I'm unaware of them having to do anything special with that chassis.
Okay. Tracy, did you have any other comments?
Well, this is just one of those hard conversations, Sam, and if you want to chit chat offline, we certainly can. But my experience is, each state, each DMV, each local jurisdiction has their own rules. If a tiny house goes into the state of like an inspect state, for example, what is an inspect state? I believe Texas and California are 2 states that are inspect state, meaning that when I bring a trailer in, I have to go down to the DMV and have the trailer inspected before I actually build on it. And then I can go build on it. And then the state still certifies it, per NFPA or ANSI 119.5 if I'm building a park model, right? So that way it can be installed in that local jurisdiction in, let's say, California. So here in Colorado, if I buy a tiny house trailer from a trailer manufacturer that's building built for purpose tiny houses, I'm going to get a couple of pieces of documentation that allow me to go to the DMV as a homeowner or, trailer owner, right? Those 2 pieces of paper, which is, your bill of sale and your MSO, manufacturer certificate of origin, or MCO, if you will. Those two documentations can go to the DMV and allow me to pay my taxes to my local DMV based off of my local jurisdiction tax rate, and also get my plates for my tiny house. So that's a typical process right now. If you're buying from a built for purpose trailer, right? If you're buying or if you're building your own trailer homegrown, that's where that conversation that you and I've had talked about previously, where there is already a process within the state for homegrown trailers. You got to go get it inspected.
Correct.
So I guess what's
And it's still that process in the state of Colorado. If you build your own trailer or you modify a trailer to carry it.
Like if it doesn't have a VIN, right? Like like these built for purpose trailers already have VIN numbers. They're tied to the state of Colorado, right? Because that manufacturer has a VINning machine that's tied to the state of Colorado.
Right. There is a
Now,
process. Go ahead, Tracy.
The last thing I'll say, Sam, is there are some states like Texas that requires builders to take an extra step. And I've kind of wondered if Colorado is going to go down this path. But it goes to what you were talking about earlier as far as modification to the trailer. In some states, if you build on top of that trailer and modify it, right, then there can be another inspection process after the trailer has been modified. That's usually pretty state specific, and I'm only aware of a couple of states that do that. And it is because of, right, like you don't want to have some, big old crazy farm equipment holding tanks, water tanks, traveling down the road on an unsafe trailer, right, behind other human beings that are driving behind that. So they want to be able to inspect that people aren't doing anything that would be hurtful, right, or unsafe on the highway.
Right. So where I see that applying most, Tracy, might be, and there's a lot of scenarios, right, would be if somebody buys a trailer, it doesn't meet the gross vehicle weight of what they think the building is going to weigh to go on there, and they add structural elements to it, the VIN number that comes from that trailer is no longer valid, right? The GVWR that comes with that trailer is
correct.
No longer valid.
Correct. So that's the scary thing, in the tiny house industry. What we try to prevent and what we try to preach as far as safety goes is that you do buy a built for purpose trailer, because a lot of times when people are going to go and grab some sort of camper trailer in grandpa's backyard, right? I know my grandpa's got a junkyard back in the valley, right? I'd love to go ahead and strip apart a couple of his camper trailers, but you by the time you reinforce everything, you got to buy new axles, new wheels, new coupler, new everything. And so at that point, you got to, that's what you're trying to prevent here, Sam, is we're trying to say, hey, use a built for purpose trailer, right? Not a refurbished camper trailer. I mean, not saying that you can't do it. It's just, there's got to be some sort of inspection process if it's going to happen that way as a DIYer.
Right. Thank you, Tracy. Robin?
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Couple of things. Just wanted to point out that I kind of like the idea of built for purpose trailers, but there's a couple of different things going over the road. If it's 8'6" or less and 13'6" tall, then you don't have to have a special use permit. Outside those, you would get a special use permit, so you are having something done to authorize the travel over the highways. And then also, or maybe not, maybe just a wide load up to 11 foot. And then once you go to 12 feet, then it gets to, special use and escorts and things like that. But anyway, so there's some difference between the width and the height of the units. And then also, when you get a trailer, you don't have certain lights that are required, clearance lights and indicator lights on the front and the back, amber, and that are up high. There's some of those too that if you're having your tiny house moved by a trailer hauler, he will temporarily put those lights up there. And most manufacturers, or some manufacturers, do put those in, but most of them don't. But when they do travel, that is a requirement. So just wanted to kind of make a differentiation there between the two.
Okay. No, and you're exactly right. I think the height requirement in Colorado is 14.6. I don't care if you guys want to build to 14.6, but then you're going to run into trouble when you leave the state, right? So I know
Correct.
the industry is trying to keep it to 13.6, but that's not a state requirement.
No, that's more of a Department of Transportation nationwide requirement for low bridges, things of that nature. So you're right. If you want to play with fire and build the 14.6 and leave Colorado and go out to Chicago, have fun with that, right? You're probably gonna
Yeah,
rip your roof off.
exactly. Yeah.
So that's why we don't do that. And that's why your manufacturers, any of the good builders are really going to build a 13.6 unless you have a customer that wants to play sit permanently.
Yes.
But and then and that point, you know, you're playing with some other things. But I did want to mention as far as the lights and stuff. So we have Department of Transportation nationwide rules that we do have to follow as builders as well. So it's much to what Robin was just mentioning as far as the amber and red lights. If I have a tiny house and there is something protruding on the side of my house outside of DOT legal limit, or if I don't have the proper lighting and I'm traveling at night, we will get pulled over and we will get ticketed. So there are rules that we are also following that also meet NHTSA, which is National Highway Security, right? Transportation Security Admin, as well as DOT. So just so everybody, you know, is aware.
Yep. All right, so there's a question from Mike on what's the difference between VIN inspection and verification in Colorado. Okay, and then you kind of answer that. Thanks. Yeah. There, and that was going back, Mike, to that process that if you modify a trailer or build a trailer, there is a Colorado Highway Patrol verification process. That's your CDOT, but they use Colorado Highway Patrol to certify that VIN number or reissue a VIN number or for those other trailers. Built for purpose trailers come with a certified VIN that the state does not have to look at because they're already, those trailer manufacturers are registered with National Highway Traffic Safety Act. Is my understanding of how that works.
You said it perfectly, Sam.
Well, not perfectly. I stuttered my way through it, Tracy, but thank you. Okay. Anybody else have any opinion on this?
Sam, one more thing, as far as that last statement there where it says, are tiny home manufacturers required to register, right, with the National Highway in order to permanently attach tiny home to the vehicle? So we pretty much try to follow IRC when it comes to attaching the unit to the chassis, right? So that's, does that make sense? Like we're following, you know, the hold downs, you know, like if you were attaching a house to a foundation and you're using HTT 2s or 4s, I don't remember which one they are, Simpson strong ties, right? It's a heavy duty bolt process that attaches through the trailer. So that way your framing is attached to the trailer, what we refer to as per code, because we're following IRC.
Okay.
Does that sound fair? Is that what you're kind of looking for?
Yes.
Because if people don't use that hardware, Sam, that is required by RRC, like when you're attaching framing to, you know, the foundation, it's the same process. We're still taking the framing and using those big, heavy hardware that Robin's team, for example, took 1 million pictures of when they did the inspection of my tiny house, right? For you guys at the state level to be able to see that the right hardware was being used. So we do take a lot of hardware pictures of that stuff to make sure that we're meeting that code. And I think some of the builders even go above and beyond what they're asked for. Like I know Austin's hardware is more than what is required.
Yes, we're talking about, yes, Tracy, you're exactly right. Permanently attached to a tiny home, to a vehicle chassis, will need to follow IRC requirements.
Okay, because that's where the DIYers fail. This is where I'm constantly teaching do-it-yourselfers not to fail in this area, right? The hardware and the framing is so critical. And so if I look at a tiny house shell and I don't see hardware, I'm already freaking out, right? Because I'm trying to teach people that's how you do it per code. So this is kind of a big emphasis piece piece that I want to make sure that we hone into. So that way, if a DIYer picks up these rules, they can read it and understand what they still need to do to meet code, right? And they can pick up that IRC 2018 and see what they need to do.
Right. All right, any other questions or discussions? All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Now the floor is open. We've got a good hard hour left if we want it, or we can call it a day. And Nate, what's your real opinion, Nate? Any other general discussions that anybody wants to have? I'm here all day, guys. Well, I want to thank everybody that's been through this process to this date. I know we've got, oh yeah, Robbie, why don't you give us this is important. Why don't you go ahead and give us an update on ResCheck compliance?
This is Robbie Schwartz. I just worked with Tracy, thanks Tracy, and we put a tiny house into the ResCheck software to see how it would perform with regards to the area weighted U value compliance option in IECC. And in, basically with the 2018 or previous versions of the IECC, there really wasn't an issue with regards to complying with the ResCheck. When you move to the 2021 IACC, it does get more difficult to comply, but you can comply with the same wall R values. It most likely is going to mean that the trade-off is going to require some exterior continuous insulation on the walls and potentially at the roof. So it would raise the structure an inch if you used like a zip bar sheathing on it. I'm sorry, yeah, it would raise it an inch. And on the exterior walls, it would add an inch to the exterior wall as well. And I think but it wouldn't necessitate moving from a 2x4 rafter to a 2x6 rafter or 2x8 rafter. Meaning that you are going to impact the height, but by an inch rather than by several inches, which I think was the biggest concern. So the pathway works well for tiny houses as well as other houses to potentially do an energy trade-off. So just wanted to let you know.
Thank you, Robbie. Does anybody have any questions for Robbie on that?
It's like Tracy has her hand up.
Tracy?
Well, I was just going to say it was a good experience to go through that. And I was thankful that Robbie was willing to spend the time with us to do it, because it took a little bit of time, for us to get through that process. And we chose to do that project or that ResCheck on one of our nonprofit builds because it was kind of a lower end window. And I wanted to see how the house performed. And Robbie actually brought up a very good point, Sam. So while I was excited that as long as you fill the cavities with that closed cell spray foam, I mean, because there's no way I would meet it with that insulation, right? There's just no way I could do that I would have met anywhere near what we met, right? So there's a path, there is a methodology, but like he said, the 2021, we missed it. Like while we passed it in the 2018, we passed it by like, I don't remember what it was, Robbie, what was it, like 1.6 or something? And then when we did it under the 2021, just to kind of get prepared of what is that going to look like? I don't remember what we failed by, Robbie. I remember the pass was 1.6 or better. I'm looking at my documentation. Do you remember what we failed by?
It failed by about
3
or 4%.
Yeah, I thought it was like,
again, I got it to pass by adding that exterior continuous insulation.
Yeah, so we'll probably have to move to, like what Robbie said, continue with the closed cell, filling the entire cavities, but then also adding the continuous insulation on the roof is where we're going to need it.
You're going to need it on the exterior walls as well.
Really, Robbie? I'm just kidding. Okay, I gotta go back and look at that. I gotta be ready for that inch because
So there
every
is-
inch matters.
Actually, I got it to pass with a 1/2 inch continuous insulation
On the roof.
on the roof and an inch on the walls.
Oh, Robbie. Okay. Thank you.
So there is a path forward
Oh.
for the current IECC code. That's good to know.
Yeah.
The tough part will be a challenge for industry if the code goes up to 21 or better, right?
That's where it's gonna get tough, right? That's
Yeah.
where everybody's designs are gonna change. Their plans, because their roofs are gonna get thicker. I mean, things are gonna change. And so let me ask this to this amazing team of people. Is there another way, just like we have with the performance path, right? I know we have the blower test, which I'm, completely working to get, some documentation on that for the team. I don't know if it's going to happen fast enough, but is there a path? I mean, we're saying that all this extra R value needs to happen, but who says so? Like the house is heating up in 5 minutes instead of 6 minutes. And I'm getting ready to change everything for roofs and charge customers a whole lot more money, change methodology, change manufacturing process, change our build methodology, change our QA. I'm about to change a lot of stuff. And I still feel like it's all to do what? To meet a checkbox because my house is going to warm up in 5 minutes instead of 6. Like, I just don't understand. How do you solve that pain?
Tracy,
The
let
proof
me-
is in the pudding, right?
Yeah, from my perspective, it's the exact same issue that a builder of a 3,500 square foot has, is that codes in general, the energy code in this case, affects the first cost equation for builders. And builders don't want to, obviously, builders don't want to either take on those first costs or pass those first costs on there. But when you're talking about the efficiency of the structure, it's relative to the size of the structure. So it's not that it heats up in 6 minutes, it's that structure of its size has a specific heat gain and heat loss there. And that's what the energy code is trying to achieve. Is what on this national consensus development process has be determined for a structure of any size to be a certain level of efficiency. So it seems like, if you were to use the true performance path, maybe you could do some additional trade-offs with house tightness and whatnot. That could, keep you without doing the exterior insulation. But it seems like this, with the ResCheck software and the area weighted U value pathway, it doesn't seem like you're being asked to do much more than you would be to do the 2018. So I'm not convinced yet that it's a significant issue besides the cost implications and builders of any size house not wanting to take on that cost.
So Robbie, if you were on my team, right, and we said, hey, Robbie, we got to go and show the envelope of this house and show how tightly it was built through the blower testing, the ResCheck, what would you do on our team to help us show that this house is completely well sealed outside of 192 square feet ceiling to seal that versus 3,500 square feet is a difference. I don't have nearly the penetration holes that something like 3,500 square feet has. So I just feel like, if you were on my team, what would you teach me to do to go and show how the energy, what you're looking for, basically, to show that this house is high efficient already as is. And really what we're doing is,
we've already done that. We've did the ResCheck based off of your model, and it's meeting the intent of the code. And you can do a blower door test on it as well, which you would be required to do as well. And it's likely to be under 3 air changes, but you don't know until you test. I've tested 2 tiny homes. One was significantly under.
Yeah, you said it was
3, and
terrible.
one was about, 7 air changes. So you just don't know until you actually test it.
Nate, did you?
One
have-
was on foundation and one was on wheels. So
Okay. Thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Tracy. Nate, you had something?
I was gonna add just one comment to this from Tracy's standpoint. It's a little bit of a soapbox is from my standpoint is that this is something that has been ongoing, from an energy code standpoint for years for kind of all of us, like, traditional builders, whether it be stick built or modular, whoever. And the one thing that's interesting about the energy code compared to the building code is that the progression of the energy code actually is accomplishing something that has a financial impact, if not an environmental impact, to our industry. Every time it gets upgraded, there's cost savings associated with the operation of the house. And that operation of the house goes on for 50, 100 years sometimes. And so those savings far outweigh the initial cost, even though as a builder, we have to absorb those. And so that's how you sell the higher energy code. My soapbox item is that the advancement of the building code is hard to measure what it's providing. The advancement of the fire code is hard to mention, is hard to measure what it's, what it's adding to us. Cause like what you hear from builders are houses falling down left and right and we don't know about them? Are they burning down every day and we don't know about them? Because they're not on the news and my neighbor's house is still here. And that's not a thing that's happening in the building industry. But at the same time, we're adding a lot of cost to improve those codes, but we don't know what we really get for it. Whereas the energy code, when we upgrade energy codes, there is actually quantifiable savings associated with each upgrade. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Good points, Nate. Any other discussions on res check or insulation requirements? Any other discussion topics? All right, you guys have been great group. Jim, if you want to stop the recording now, I would appreciate it. And we